understanding and helpful during this difficult period of time. You guys definitely made my life a little bit easier by being so understanding and cooperative. So I really do earnestly appreciate it. All right, so let's look at some of these here. We'll go with Elizabeth, since you were speaking, we'll talk about yours first.
Okay.
And we'll kind of put them side by side. And uh, let's see. Um, Olivia, you there?
Yes.
Okay, so how do you think Elizabeth is prepared for moving forward?
I think it looks pretty good. I think there's a little bit too much shadow with the orange. I feel like there should be a little more yellow.
Okay.
But overall, I think it looks pretty good for the
Right.
start.
Yeah, and what I would say is that, just speaking from the standpoint of analogous, okay, so this is a yellow flower, and you have leaned a yellow flower a little bit into what I would call analogous color. So analogous color, and I'll just pull up the internet here. Analogous color is going to be colors that sit right next to each other on the color wheel. So like if you have a palette of green, yellow green, and a bluish green, that's going to be an analogous palette. And that's kind of what you're going to be having in your image. But you went a little further. You went from yellow all the way to like orange and red.
Okay.
So you went a little bit further than you should have. You should have kind of stayed in this range.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So like if we look at this, you're going to be more like yellow, orange, but well, right here, yellow, yellow, orange, yellow, green. But you're going to be even more subtle than that because it's predominantly yellow. Now, I said in the introduction to this particular stage, which is layer number one, that we can push it and kind of get crazy with it and out of control. But I would say that the orange and orange red kind of took over. Does
Okay.
that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't have gone this red. I would have only have gone into this yellowy orange that we have in here. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yes,
And
sir.
you've got some of the yellowy green here, which is actually, I'm assuming, a mixture of your yellow and what? Purple?
It's yeah, it's yellow, blue, um all fudge.
Well, let
I
me
forgot
just
what
show
it's
you.
called. Yeah.
So if we're going to darken yellow, we have two choices. So, and we actually only have one choice. So this is yellow mixed with black.
Mhm.
Now, what happens to the yellow once you get down into this zone?
It's more muted.
It's more muted, but color-wise, what does it look like?
Green.
It looks very green. Versus if we mix yellow with its complement, purple, what do you notice when we get into the
More
darker yellows?
brownish.
They become more brown. You follow what I mean?
Yes, sir.
So in those darker areas, you want to have, blue and red together to get your violet with yellow on the opposite side. And you want to stop around here
Okay.
with the shadows. Now, you're supposed to be having color temperature variation. We all are. So in addition to yellow, you're going into yellow orange. You follow what I
Mhm.
mean? So you're also going to have these browns as well as these yellows.
Okay, yeah.
See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
And then you might stretch over into yellow green, but you're going to stay kind of in the higher key of it. And really, it's going to be more like a yellow green instead of a yellow green. You follow what I
Okay.
mean?
Yes,
But
sir.
yellow is going to predominate. And all of your shadows, again, if we look back at your comparison, you know, all of these shadows, including these shadows, they may look yellow because we're seeing them in the context of these yellows that are really intense and bright. But in reality, like if I was to mix this right here, which obviously is not as intense as this, or if I was to mix these colors over in here, probably what I'm going to do, these colors in here, probably what I'm going to wind up seeing on my palette are these.
Okay. Yeah.
So like, again, these leaves that are the brightest and they're closest to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be mixtures like in this range or this range, really top up. So from
Okay.
here up, you follow what I mean?
Yes, sir.
As I move into these areas here or these areas here where I don't have those intense lights, oops. I'm going to be using palette like this.
Okay.
So the highest key in those leaves on the left side of the painting or in the areas that are the leaves are in shadow, my brightest yellow is going to be here or here. You follow what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I went way too extreme.
So yeah, you just went crazy with it and got too much into the yellow, orange, and orange. Now that said, you do have some really nice darks that I think are appropriate for what you're looking for. But I think you just went too far in the yellow direction.
Okay.
All of that, I mean, I'm sorry, in the red, orange direction. You needed to go farther in the yellow direction. So you have some of those colors here, here, down in here, down in here, down in here, in this little piece right here. That whole thing right there is full of a palette that you could use over the whole object, right? It's
Okay.
just
Yeah.
these colors that are too intense. Okay.
Okay.
Now, as far as where you put the darks and the lights, you're fine. They just should have been more neutral and less intense. Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes,
That's
sir.
why I said, like in the video that I sent out, where it was better produced, like just me talking, not part of the class video.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, you know, the video, you know, our class discussion where I showed the how-to video, I meant to record it and I thought I did record it, but it didn't record. So I had to re-record the whole demo again, which is why it took me till Saturday to get it out to you guys. But like if this was a green object, like Rebecca's object, um, or I guess we could talk about Josie's here. Like this is a green object. All
Mm-hmm.
of these darker greens down in here, I'll show you. Let's do a red. Oops. So you can see here, red to green, and you can see how as we mix red into that green, look what happens to it.
Yeah.
It becomes darker. Now, I would argue that this is still fairly intense, but it's not as intense as this is, and it's not as light as this is. And relatively speaking, I would call it a moderate intensity color. Then you get over here, and that's going to be your deepest shadow. So if we go back to Josie's image, you know, these deepest shadows here and here, and then these deep shadows that are almost blacks, those are going to be like this color. Now, I do want to say one thing about this mixture. What do you notice about these middle hues, Josie or Elizabeth, and the mixture that we see here?
More grayish.
Well, this is pretty gray.
Yeah.
It's
But-
not like dark enough.
Yeah, you see how dark this is? So what do you think they did here that made it not so dark?
Maybe they had some white in there.
Yeah, they added white so that they could see it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I can look at like a color scale like this, and you can see they didn't add as much white, or like a color scale like this. They made a big jump there. These are really bad color scales. But look at how dark the straight out of the tube hue is, or in here, look at how dark that straight out of the tube hue is.
Yeah.
So these scales are really bad because they jump too quickly from green. Like these colors should actually be towards the middle. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
So I hope you guys are starting to see now a little bit more about, what these complementary mixtures can produce. Now, if we pull up Josie's, oops. Oh, while I'm thinking about it, yes, I'm recording. Yay. Just wanted to make sure. Don't want to have that happen again. Huh, totally disappeared. Okay, fine. Okay. So Elizabeth, talk to me about what Josie has here.
I see a lot of the, like you were saying, like the darker greens towards the ends of the branches, especially along the right side, the middle right side. There could be maybe a little bit more darker on the branches under here, I think.
Which branches are you referring to, Elizabeth?
The middle one, the first full one that you see, the middle one.
This one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're saying underneath she could have some darker.
That brown shade that I have is kind of meant to be that. I meant to make the spaces in between a little lighter. but
Yeah,
then
so
I
you're
didn't.
saying
Yeah.
these negative spaces here, Josie.
Yeah.
Okay.
I meant to reduce that to like more of like a lighter green
hmm
so that it matched the image a little bit more and leave that dark for the bottom of the branches.
But still neutral. Now, one thing that I
Mhm.
would say is that your branch is a little too orange. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I realized that whenever I put them side by side myself, the
So-
branch is a little bit like yellowy, greenish.
Right. So
Very neutral, but
very neutral. Exactly. So probably what I would be
I have
looking
that in
at.
my notes to fix that.
So probably what I would be looking at, if I was to find a color, probably something in this zone with white added to it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So probably leaning about here, but also, and you can start to see it in here, but I think also probably more, like you said, a yellow green. So we would do a yellow green.
I have a question.
Sure.
Is it okay if I use the green? Because I'm like almost dead out of the yellow.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool.
Wait, you're almost, I'm confused.
I'm almost out of the yellow, so I can't mix any more green. So I was
Okay.
wondering if I could use the permanent green.
Yeah, that's fine. But you want to have some yellow green too, right?
Yeah,
So-
I have a little bit of yellow left. I just don't have enough to keep mixing the color.
Okay. So I don't see a yellow green complementary color scale here.
Speaking of running out of colors, I'm almost out of red because my last painting was red, and then my painting now uses a lot of red.
Yeah, I have some colors for you.
Okay.
The only thing that I don't have replacement for is the colors that you guys bought for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Well, I don't see a yellow green. Well, here we go. Yeah, so here's a yellow green versus a green. And you can see like probably down in this zone, or maybe in this zone right here, is where you're going to get that gray from. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely think it's not that it's not that your palette is sorry, there we go. It's not that your palette is analogous, but it's pretty close to it. You know, I would even say that this is almost getting into a yellow, uh, and outside of the green, yellow green family. So that might even be a color that you would mix, uh, just like we were talking to Elizabeth, with a purple and a yellow to try to get some of that color, because that's really gray. You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I do think that the way that you approached it is good. It looks right. Are you going to try to kind of blend as you go back and make it more focused towards the foreground like they've done in the photograph?
I'm gonna try, but I can't make promises.
Right.
It might just end up being a little bit too sharp in the back.
Well, what I
I'll
would
try to blur it out a little bit.
well, what I would say is that this is pretty blurry right here. You know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
tried to make it pretty undefined.
Yeah. So really the only area that, like to me, this is too defined.
Yeah.
And obviously this guy's too defined.
Mhm.
But that's like right now, this feels very parallel to the picture plane and you want it to be perpendicular, moving back in space. So I think
Mhm.
blurring is
I
going to
also need to make the stem a little bit smaller
yeah,
in
that's
general as it goes backwards.
yep, yep, definitely. But I think you're on the right track. It's a little too much of a complementary, like, don't mistake a complementary color scheme and a complementary palette. Yes, we're mixing complements in order to get neutral versions of the colors that we're using, but we don't really have a complementary palette as such, um, especially not in this particular image. Some of them may, uh, but not to the degree that we would see uh, in a very conscious way. Um, it's more about mixture. All right. So let's look at Brooks. Oops. Okay, Josie, talk to me about Brooks.
I think she did a great job of capturing like the undertones of like the red, and then it shades over and it's like more of a violet color on the left. And I think that makes a nice transition, and it shows that there's more light on the right than there is the left.
Mm-hmm.
It does throw me off because it's like all I can see in the image are the light and the black parts,
Mm-hmm.
but in her image it's just like the darks and the mediums. But I think she did a good job of getting that tone down. It looks pretty
Yeah,
spot on.
I think that the color that you have, Brooke, is good. This kind of reddish brown violet color, or red violet brown, I guess is what it is. And then as you move over in here, this really dark violet um, brown as well, um, almost black, which is good. But what are your thoughts about it, Brooke? Like, where do you feel like you maybe got hung up a little bit?
I think I got hung up with trying to like blend it too smoothly. But I wanted like not the last layer, but like the second to last layer to be those like really bright white strokes on top, because then the
Yeah.
last part's going to be like putting in those little black dots on all of them.
Right. So what I would have done, just to make it a little bit further along, because basically, like if I was to lift off all the white and black texture, this is what we would see, what you've got in your painting, right? But blacks are part of it. So I would have had, some of those black dots, if you will, throughout the image. But then you're like, well, where would I put them? You know what I mean? I don't have the streaks to put the black dots on. Well, my question is within this or this or this or this or this or this are there middle tones in there? In other words, are there streaks of quote unquote white that are of a middle tone?
Yeah, a little.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like these are middle tones, these little,
Mhm.
and it's hard because you know that they're white in your head. You understand what I mean?
Yeah.
But they don't look white. In fact, they're not white nor light. Like the only lights that I'm seeing are maybe like these right here, and the only whites that I'm seeing are very few and far between. You know, like
Mhm.
little hairs here and there or up here. So I guess what I would have liked to have seen was maybe some black stripes, both horizontal, like these, right? Where they're really black, you know, eating into this area. You've got like the hint of some of them, but I think I
Mhm.
would have done, this is what I would say going into the next one, is like I would create a black stripe here,
Okay.
right? You follow what I mean? And I would create a black stripe here, down in here, and I would create a big black stripe here and through here. You follow what I mean?
Yes.
And then I would mix up some of this kind of lighter red and gray red, and in between those black stripes, get some of those, I guess, what I would call middle tone whites, which I know sounds contradictory, but if we were to take a value photograph of this, you would see that there's a lot of middle tone stripes that are happening. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yes, that does.
So you're going to be kind of like a step behind as we move forward. That said, there's a lot of light in this image. So you can kind of combine the middle value phase with the light value phase, because the next phase is light and light middles versus the dark and middles that we had in our last in this exercise.
Okay.
I
All
have a
right.
question.
Sure.
So when we're doing this project and we have like an image that has a lot of color, are we basically just dulling down the colors and only focusing on the gray tones? I mean, the neutral tones.
No. We're focusing on the darks and the middle tones, the middle values. So dark all the way up to middle. So let's take this. And who's asking the question, by the way?
Sophia.
Okay. That's okay. And I'll try to hurry, Sophia, because you got to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll try to hurry as quick as I can. So
I appreciate it.
let's devoid this of color. All right. So we've got all kinds of middle value hues in here, right? These are middle value hues. These are all middle value hues. There's lots of middle value hues in here. As we get into here, we get into dark hues, right? They're gray. They're not black like over here, but they're still dark hues. Does that make sense? Dark hues, middle value hue, middle value hue. Now, if we step back, I guess we can do it this way. You've got green here, right? But that's not neutral. But it is derived from a relatively neutral color, which is here. Do you follow what I mean?
Yes.
So, you know, you're going to be using these colors in their pure form, not necessarily with white, although some of them do have white, for these dark areas in here. So they are relatively neutral, Sophia, but they're not dead neutrals,
Okay.
unless there's an area where there is a dead neutral. And I would say that these and some of these darker murky areas do get into a dead neutral. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do the one with the bark lights because I think that one's really cool. But that one has a lot of neutral colors. It's got a lot of grays and browns and like the
Right.
bark.
Right. So I think, you know, just judging from what I remember about yours is probably a blue orange with your grays coming from this center.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay.
So, like in this image, Clarissa, these darks here are going to be coming from the red green complement, giving you that black right in the middle with no white in it, like is happening in this image. Versus you, Sophia, who are going to be having, you know, colors like this dark and light versions that are the result of mixtures of blue and orange.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And they might lean a little here and lean a little there. So a little more intense, but you're going to restrict yourself to this. Whereas Clarissa, you've got this all the way down through here, but not into, well, you actually do go into this zone, don't you? Because you get into the oranges, right?
Yeah, there's some orange and yellow in there.
But most of your oranges and yellows are pretty vibrant. You know, like the most neutral orange is in this groove right here. Like, so that yellow right there is going to be derived from like this mixture of violet and yellow. You follow what I mean? Versus when you get up into this zone, which is orangey, you're going to be, well, they've kind of cut us off here.